There are moments in Scripture where the Bible does not rush past the brokenness of humanity, right? It sits with it and it names it and it tells the truth about what happens inside the human heart when we stop paying attention to what is forming us. So in Genesis chapters 4 through 7, we're going to see that, right? These are very heavy but very honest chapters, and yet they are deeply loving chapters because God does not look away from us when things fall apart, right? So in Genesis 4, it opens with a story that a lot of us, I think we already fully know about. Cain and Abel, two brothers, two offerings, one accepted, one not. But the most important moment in that story, in my opinion, is not the murder. It's the conversation God has with Cain before anything violent ever happens. God comes close and says, "Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen?" God's not scolding Cain. He's inviting him to notice himself. He's inviting him to reflect on himself. And then God does something that feels almost like amazingly startling in its tenderness and clarity. Sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. God is naming that internal process. He's saying, pay attention to what is happening inside you right now. Because if you don't tend it, it will tend you, right? So that's not just spiritual language, it's deeply human language, because when disappointment and shame and rejection or comparison go unprocessed, the mind will move into threat mode and the body will start bracing and our thoughts will start to narrow and we start to ruminate. Cain, he did not pause. He does not process his feelings with God, and he does not bring his disappointment into relationship. And then what was unattended inside of him eventually comes out of him, right? So Genesis 4 is not just about brother killing brother. It's about what grows when emotions are ignored and when warnings are dismissed, right? Because God showed up early in this, and he spoke early in this, and Cain chose to keep moving without slowing down, right? And as Genesis continues into chapters 5, 6, and 7, we watch that same pattern expand outward, right? Violence increases, corruption spreads, the inner disorder of the human heart becomes visible in the external world. And scripture tells us that God grieved. And that matters because God was not indifferent about what was going on. He was not cold. He was sorrowful over what humanity had become. That gives us a sense of his character and his heart, right? And even in judgment, God's patient, right? He gives warnings, he gives time, he gives instruction. And then we see Noah, and Noah's obedience, it's not flashy, it is steady, it is slow, and it is relational. And the ark becomes a place of refuge in the middle of chaos, right? A place of preservation while the world is unmaking itself. And the flood story is not primarily about destruction. It's about God refusing to abandon his creation. It's about restraint as much as it is about justice, right? God could have walked away, but he didn't. He chose preservation. And then when we turn over and we go into Proverbs chapter 2, we begin to understand how God intends to guard the human heart from repeating the patterns we see in Genesis, right? Proverbs 2 does not describe wisdom as something loud or forceful. Wisdom is not about performance or perfection, it's about posture. And the chapter uses words like receive and treasure and incline and listen and store up. This is like slow language, right? It's relational language. Wisdom is not something you grab, it's something you make room for. You lean toward it and you stay with it. And scripture tells us that if we seek wisdom like a hidden treasure, something happens. Understanding begins to guard us, and discretion begins to watch over us, and wisdom becomes a form of protection. And that is such an important reframe, because wisdom is not about being impressive. It's about being safe. Safe from paths that slowly erode us, and safe from decisions made in emotional overwhelm, and safe from living in autopilot. And God knows how the human mind works, right? Because he designed it. He knows that formation happens over time, and that patterns are built through repetition, and that hearts are shaped by what we consistently allow in. Proverbs is God saying, let me teach you how to stay. And then as we come into Psalm 8 this week, it almost feels like a deep breath after heavy truth, right? David looks up at the sky, he sees the moon and the stars, and he asks, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? And after reading about the murder and corruption and floodwaters, Psalm 8 reminds us of something very essential. That God's view of humanity is not erased by human failure. We are still crowned with glory and honor, and we are still entrusted with responsibility. We are still seen, even in our brokenness. Psalm 8 restores dignity, right? It pulls us out of shame. It reorients the heart away from self-loathing and back towards awe. And awe matters because awe, it calms the nervous system. Awe widens our perspective. Awe reminds us that we are small, but never insignificant. So when you hold Genesis 4-7 and Proverbs 2 and Psalm 8 together, a picture begins to form. That God cares deeply about what happens inside us. He warns us before destruction. He offers wisdom as protection, and he never forgets our value, even when we forget it ourselves. And this matters for everyday life. It matters when you feel overlooked and disappointed or rejected. And it matters when comparison creeps in. And it matters when you feel the urge to rush and react or shut down. Right? God's invitation is the same now as it was to Cain. Pause. Notice. Look inside yourself. Bring it into the light. And you cannot rush formation. You can't speed your way into wisdom. Because relationship with God, like any real relationship, is built through time, trust, and presence. You learn someone by staying with them. And you learn God by staying with his word, not racing through it. So if you're finding yourself tired and reactive or spiritually dry, this isn't a call to try harder. It's a call to slow down. Right? To incline your ear and just treasure what God says and let wisdom guard you instead of pressure driving you. Right? And if you're carrying shame from past choices, Psalm 8 speaks directly to you because you are still crowned with glory and honor, and God is still mindful of you. He has not stepped away. God's desire has always been relationship, not rush. To be still, to form, not force, to have presence, not performance. So today, the invitation is simple. Stay, listen, let God tend your heart before anything else takes root. right? Because what grows in the quiet places of the soul eventually shapes the whole of our lives.